Welcome to High Truths on Drugs and Addiction, where national experts bring you facts and answers. I'm your host, Dr. Ronit Lev, an emergency and addiction doctor who has served at the White House and practiced on the front lines. Right here on High Truths, you will learn from experts from around the globe and around all aspects of drugs and addiction. High Truths is more than a podcast. It's a movement to unite physical, mental, and addiction health. It brings innovations to connect public health, public safety, and prevention. Our discussions inspire people to implement programs that save lives. To grow this community of information and action, I hope you give us a 5-star review. Come visit me on hightruths.com. Today's episode is sponsored by Drug Free America Foundation, tackling the pervasive issue of substance use and its far-reaching impacts on individuals, families, and community. Drug Free America is supporting ISAC, the International Academy on the Science and Impact of Cannabis, doctors and scientists educating on the harms of marijuana. Hello again, High Truth listeners. Get ready for a Farm Bill conversation. I'm your host, Dr. Ronit Lev. Farm Bill, as in the big, omnibus federal legislative bill that is the primary agricultural and food policy instrument for the federal government. Congress passes a new farm bill every 5 or 6 years. We love our American farmers. We have to. We couldn't eat without them. Back in the 1920s, the agricultural industry was depressed while the rest of the economy flourished. Farmers lobbied Congress, and President Hoover set up a federal farm board to assist. Over the years, farmers continued to request reforms and protection to their industry. The 2018 Farm Bill included nutritional programs and conservation efforts, but it did something new and transformative. It declassifies hemp and hemp seeds. Congress's definition of hemp was anything less than 0.3% dry weight delta-9 THC. What is 0.3% dry weight? A 85-gram muffin could have 255 milligrams of delta-9 THC. That's a heck of a lot of psychoactive material. Most states have a limit of 10 milligrams of THC per dose or 100 per package. The addiction for-profit industry took the Farm Bill congressional hemp definition and ran with it. Hey, we can sell all sorts of products without delta-9 THC. Instead, we'll make products with delta-H THC, delta-10 THC, THC-OA, and new variations of the drug with the THC molecule. All these brand new products met the congressional definition for hemp, and yet they were never tested in lab rats. Our children became the guinea pigs for these new intoxicating hemp-derived products. The FDA does not regulate these products. They punted the problem back to Congress to solve. As a temporary measure, they placed a warning that delta-8 products can be hazardous to your health. But I don't think the smoke shops and gas stations paid any attention to that. Some smart states have banned these delta-8 products, also known as semi-synthetic or derived intoxicating cannabis products. States that ban these products have benefited from improved public health. They have half the number of 12th graders that use these drugs. To learn all there is to know about the Farm Bill, I reached out to Sue Thau. Sue Thau is a public policy consultant representing CADCA, Communities Anti-Drug Coalitions of America. If you're involved in drug prevention, you have to know Sue. She started her career as a budget examiner and legislative analyst at the White House Office of Management and Budget, OMB. She applies that background to drug prevention advocacy and legislative changes on a federal, state, and local level. Sue was a driving force behind the passage, reauthorization, and full funding of the Drug-Free Communities Act. She worked to save and enhance funding for all federal substance abuse prevention and treatment programs over the past 2 decades. Recently, Sue has been working on fixing the loopholes in the Farm Bill. To learn more about Sue Thau, check out the High Truth show notes. I recorded this conversation with Sue on February 28th, 2025. Sue Thau, welcome to High Truths.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here.
I am too, and it's always a pleasure to see you no matter where we are. We see each other in D.C. and California and at meetings in Vienna, and I love it because you're my bestie.
I know, totally. BFFs.
Yes, and then I'm so excited to have you on High Truths. We are BFFs. I remember the first time. Sometimes you just meet someone and I don't know. I saw you in a room, this petite woman at I think it was the third annual RX Summit. And I saw you and I had like this immediate connection.
Oh, we did, because we were both there, like talking about what a problem marijuana legalization was. And
Right.
I'm thrilled to meet a medical doctor who is actually willing to stand up and speak the truth. So I love High Truths. I love the name of the whole podcast. But yes, that's what connected us, other than everyone thought we were sisters.
That's right. And to this day, people say, are we sisters? And at this point, we're like, yeah. At this point, it's been enough years. We are sisters. So I want the audience to get to know you as well. You started, I didn't even know this, but you started at Cornell studying human development and then family studies, regional planning, and somehow that got you to the White House. So can you tell us about that?
Oh, yeah, absolutely. So I started, my undergraduate degree was in basically developmental psychology, and I didn't want to be a psychologist. And I decided I was really interested in changing environments to be able to change behavior. So I got my master's in city and regional planning. And then I moved to Washington to run an actual substance use prevention program at the Commerce Department, of all places. And then I ended up going to the Office of Management and Budget and worked as a budget examiner and a legislative analyst. And interestingly enough, that was also through a connection. When I ran the grant program, I had to take away the grant to the city of Boston. And instead of them hating me and thinking I was a lunatic, the woman who I took the grant away from ended up at the White House during Jimmy Carter's administration. And she's so respected that I had the guts to take a grant away during a Democratic administration from a big Democratic city, that she asked if I wanted to work at OMB. So that's how that happened.
Wow. Isn't that, when you're brave and true to yourself, it just pays off. What did they do so bad to make them have a grant taken away?
So they applied for the grant to be able to do a specific scope of work, and then they didn't use it for what they had applied for at all. They used it for something totally different. And that's not legal. You actually have to use the money for what you say you're going to use it for. And when I challenged them on it, they said, oh, well, we really did need the money, but we needed it for something else. And I was like, well, that's not how this works. You actually have to do what you say you're going to do with federal money.
Well, Sue, we could have you working for Elon Musk right now. Yeah, that's what he's doing. He's doing that through computers. You'd figure that out, the old-fashioned way.
Yeah, no, I had a site visit. Exactly. It was the old-fashioned way. Exactly.
That's right. And then from that, so working and just, I don't think people know what OMB is. That's part of the White House.
Of National, excuse me, that's ONDCP. No, OMB is the Office of Management and Budget. So we put the president's budget request to Congress together every year. The enrolled bill memo. So when a bill passes both the House and the Senate, the president has 10 days within which to sign or veto it, excluding Sundays. And we wrote the enrolled bill memos for the president to tell him whether he should sign or veto a bill. ONDCP also clears all of the testimony from everyone in the administration before they're allowed to go up and speak on Capitol Hill. And it also has the regulatory affairs group in it that has to basically sign off on all regulations in the government. So they're a very important part of the executive office of the president.
Right. And at this point, I don't know if their roles have changed over the years since when you or they really oversee everybody's budget.
They always did. Yeah, exactly. So that's what I did as a budget examiner. You have a whole agency that you're responsible for. You oversee their whole budget in addition to any legislation that might be proposed or that is proposed in Congress. You need to review it and decide what position the president should take on it. And it's the same with any regulation. So a budget examiner has a really very large job, given you're responsible for basically knowing everything for an entire agency. It's a lot of work. It was 18 hours a day, 7 days a week for the whole time I worked.
Is it kind of like forensic accounting for government?
That's part of it. Absolutely.
Yeah, money part and what they do. And so now you have this experience with regions and communities, but also now legislation and accounting and budget. And is that how you got to CADCA?
Well, interestingly enough, I got to CADCA through another best friend named Ellen Morehouse, who some people might know in this field. She was the person who developed the concept of a student assistance program, which is similar to an employee assistance program. So it works in schools with psychiatric social workers and counselors who are addiction specialists to help do prevention intervention in the schools, to train the teachers, to work with the community, and also to work with the students who are identified as either being at risk for using or who have started to use, who you try to get to use less. She was on the board, not of CADCA, but of a different group that was looking to be represented in Washington. And I had actually left OMB when I had my second child, because I don't know why I had a second kid if I was never going to be home to bring them up. So I actually quit OMB and became the volunteer of the year. I was the president of a PTA, and I was teaching people Hebrew. I was doing a lot of things, but she was like, "Oh, this is so interesting. You can work. These people don't have much money, so you can, be their advocate and work out of your house." And so from that experience, I met the people at CADCA, and then they hired me, and the rest is sort of history. I've been with CADCA for 32 years at this point.
Wow. So I want to get to CADCA. I want the audience to understand what they do. But I want to first talk about the Farm Bill. I made this episode come out kind of like the presentation that you did at CADCA, everything you wanted to know, and we're afraid to ask about the Farm Bill. So can you give us first like a little brief history? I have prepared the audience with some information, but it's always good to hear it from the expert.
No, absolutely. So the 2018 Farm Bill legalized hemp, and they defined hemp as any dry weight of a plant. And I think you have talked about this to your audience before. Some of these hemp and marijuana plants can be gigantic. They're as big as like an oak tree. And so the whole plant had to have less than 0.3% THC on a dry weight basis. And it was originally supposed to be to help the agricultural industry. People were thinking that somehow there was an untapped need for hemp, for rope, and for clothing, and also for farmers in places like Kentucky that had grown a lot of tobacco that weren't growing so much tobacco anymore, to have an alternative crop. And it seemed like this great thing. And 0.3% THC was supposed to be this tiny, tiny, tiny amount of THC that was going to differentiate hemp plants from marijuana plants. Now, we in the field had a problem with the hemp legalization bill because we sort of knew, one, it's very hard to tell the difference between a hemp plant and a marijuana plant, especially if you're going to be in a helicopter looking for big grows. So there were a lot of issues that we had with this bill, but it did pass into law. And lo and behold, the bottom fell out of the hemp market because too many people decided hemp was the answer to make a lot of money. And they started using all of this acreage to grow hemp. And then there was no market for hemp. Like, how many people really want to wear hemp clothing? And there wasn't that big a market to use it for industrial purposes. So all of a sudden, people were trying to figure out another way to use hemp to be able to make money, given they had all of this product. So there were sort of three buckets that came out of the hemp bill that really affect your audience. The first one is that there's a tremendous amount of CBD in hemp. So people extracted the CBD from hemp. And if you go into your grocery store or to a drugstore or a convenience store, it's amazing what hemp is in. It's in hand sanitizer, shampoo, creams, lotions, and none of that is really approved by the FDA. Just saying, although there's a lot of claims made that that CBD is some sort of a miracle drug, but other than, as you know very well, Epidiolex, which is the one drug made from CBD that is FDA approved for Dravet syndrome and severe shaking. My brain.
It's a pediatric seizures like Lennox-Gastaut syndrome and very rare seizures that babies have where they're having hundreds of seizures a day, and pure CBD helps them. These kids are not smoking weed.
No, exactly.
Right, yeah.
And it's pharmaceutical grade. But there were definitely, as you also know, some problems, like liver damage was one of the potential problems that they identified when the FDA approved this, and nobody is talking about that to anybody. But so we have the CBD issue. That's one bucket of issues that came out of the legalization of hemp. The second one is that 0.3% THC on dry weight in an entire plant, when you extract the THC and you put it into a muffin or a drink, 0.3% of a tiny thing can be 5, 10, 15, or 20 milligrams of THC in a serving of a drink or a muffin. So in states like Iowa that have not legalized marijuana, they're selling the THC products that are derived from hemp as legal, even though, in fact, marijuana has not been legalized in those states. So that's a second bucket of issues, which is that the THC derived from hemp is actually getting into the market and is being used, and it's being advertised as, quote, legal because it's derived from the 0.3%.
Yeah, we did the calculation on an 85-gram muffin, 0.3% THC would be 225 milligrams of THC. That's a heck of a lot of THC.
A heck of a lot. So you totally got it. And then the third bucket was a totally unintended consequence of the Farm Bill passing, which are these semi-synthetic cannabinoids such as Delta-8, Delta-10, THC-0, THCA, and they're basically derived from taking little bits of the CBD in hemp and putting them through these chemical processes that involve using heavy metals and bases to neutralize the acids in them, and they're not regulated at all. They're extremely cheap. They're basically sold in gas stations, bodegas, convenience stores. They're sold all over the place. And
did we even see that coming?
Nobody saw it coming. We call it an unintended consequence of no one ever heard of these substances before. It was very smart chemists were thinking, well, how do you make even more money from hemp than, either trying to turn it into some industrial product, putting it out as CBD product.
But the malicious part of it is these products are not coming from hemp. They're not from a plant. They're made in a lab, so it's totally cheating.
They're made in a lab from tiny bits of CBD or other components of the hemp plant that don't occur naturally in big enough quantities to be extracted and used. So instead, they extract one tiny piece, molecules from these plants, and then yes, they're synthetic and semi-synthetic drugs. So they're made in a lab, absolutely.
But the point is, these are not helping farmers. These are not farmers for the Farm Bill it was intended to who are making this.
No, but the farmers are selling the products to people who are then manufacturing these products. These, for the most part, are not made on a farm. It's people who are, purchasing the hemp and then extracting these and then making these drugs that they're claiming are legal because of the Farm Bill having legalized hemp and the fact that they're derived from little bits of stuff in hemp. And the really big problem here is that a number of people have brought lawsuits saying that these shouldn't be legal, and the courts are finding because they're derived from hemp and the Farm Bill legalized hemp that they actually are legal, which is why we're fighting very hard to close the loophole in the Farm Bill. The Farm Bill was supposed to be reauthorized in 2024, and they extended it for a year. And then last year, when they couldn't pass a Farm Bill, they extended it for one more year, and they're working on it now. And we're working very hard to close the loophole altogether. The industry would like this to be regulated. And the problem, if I could just say, it started out that everyone heard about Delta 8. There are now 28 of these separate synthetic and semi-synthetic cannabinoids that are being put into blends. And there are like 185 right now different blends of these things on the market. And nobody understands the effects or the effects on people, not only on how it affects you mentally, emotionally, makes you high, but also physical effects. Like this stuff has some poisons and other things in it, totally not regulated. So no one understands very much about any one of these, no less when you start combining all of them together into these blends. Then we're in the Wild West if nobody really knows exactly what these products are and what any short or long-term real effects of them are. And people are ending up in emergency rooms, foaming at the mouth. They're very similar to what happened with K2 and spice. And I'm sure you've done previous shows on those. Well, those were
synthetic marijuana, right?
Those were synthetic marijuana that basically were sold in gas stations, the same thing. And it said right on them, not for human consumption, although everyone who bought them knew that they were going to use them to get high. So it's the same sort of thing. Totally unregulated, dangerous, totally available to kids. They're sold not behind any cabinet. There's no age restrictions. And what we're saying is we're not looking to regulate them. These products never should have existed at all. It was truly an unintended consequence of the Farm Bill. And we have enough issues trying to regulate CBD, which is now so widely proliferated. That's going to be hard to close that down. We're dealing with marijuana. We're dealing with the THC from hemp. The last thing we need is these other products that never should have existed to be widely available to youth, adults, and everybody else in communities. So our argument is that these shouldn't have existed, and therefore the Farm Bill should close the loophole that allowed these to be manufactured. But the longer this goes and the more this industry grows and grows, the more powerful they become, and the more likely we are now. There's a hemp roundtable that's claiming it's going to put all these poor business people who are selling this out of business. If they close the loophole, they'd like to, quote, self-regulate. And we've seen that with every other industry that sells like tobacco, alcohol. They're not very good at self-regulation, given to be able to make money. You have to have people who continue to buy your product and are addicted to it. Nobody makes money on the person who has a glass of wine a month. That's not how the
And I love the analogy. You're going to get big tobacco to regulate themselves? Did you want big pharma and oxycodone and Purdue Pharma to regulate themselves?
So what we're saying is regulation, and I just want to explain this to everybody. People are like, let's tax and regulate it. So look at marijuana. Whatever you're going to raise in taxes doesn't begin to pay for what it would take to actually regulate something with any scale and scope, because there's not enough money. Regulation means bureaucracy. It means taxes. And the minute you tax and regulate something, the price goes up. And then, of course, you have the illicit market, still a gigantic source of where people are getting their marijuana from, because it's cheaper than it would be to go to a dispensary. And it's basically the same stuff. So this stuff isn't regulated at all. And what we're saying is it would almost be impossible to regulate it because it's synthetic. The minute you start to regulate one thing, like the industry is talking about Delta 8, but there's 185 combinations of this. How do you regulate something that you can innovate to change? The minute you're going to regulate X, they're going to turn it into Y. And that's exactly what's happening with fentanyl and with the opioids. Unless you schedule the whole class, chemists just change one molecule and they get out from under the scheduling.
The whack-a-mole. So to understand the loophole, the loophole in the Farm Bill, according to your explanation, is that CBD isn't regulated, right? That it has, we know from the FDA label of Epidiolex, which is legal CBD, pharmaceutical grade CBD, that there are side effects, over 500 different drug interactions, et cetera. Is one of the loopholes is that FDA is not really doing their job or not able to do their job?
One of the loopholes, yes, is that FDA is saying they'd like to be able to regulate this, but they need money and people to do it. This is my point about regulation as bureaucracy, and everybody's trying to cut bureaucracy.
So one loophole is making sure that the CBD out there that, is legal is safe.
That's, yes, and and let me explain something too about the buckets. So the first bucket, which we said was the CBD, that does need to be regulated by the FDA, and the FDA is not in the agriculture department. So that really, the Farm Bill gigantic loophole that caused the 3 buckets of problems, the Farm Bill can't fix the issue that FDA isn't regulating this, because FDA is actually not in the agriculture department, and FDA is not authorized or appropriated in the agriculture department. So you can't really fix that in the Farm Bill. You actually have.
Can you explain that a little bit? Because FDA is Food and Drug Administration. And although the Farm Bill was supposed to be for fabric and not food, they became food. So how come they can't regulate this food?
That's a very good question. It's because the Ag Bill is basically saying that the Agriculture Committee is saying that needs to be fixed by working with the FDA.
Okay.
So, and they're trying to work with them. They've had hearings on it. And so, I'm going to ask you the question, supposedly CBD is not psychoactive and that it doesn't make you high. Is that true or not true? I've had people say, well, it can help with sleep, so therefore maybe it's somewhat psychoactive, but it's not psychoactive in the way that THC is, so that people aren't using it to get high necessarily. Although, because it's not regulated, when they test the CBD, it turns out there can be THC in the product.
You got it, Sue. That's it. You don't know what you're buying. That's the problem. Like, so if somebody say have I ever treated someone with CBD poisoning? Probably not, but have I treated people who thought they were using CBD and they test positive for THC? Yeah.
Exactly. And the problem too is that people will take it relying on a label that is really not correct, given the FDA and others have tested these products. And, 80% of them, what it says on the label doesn't match what the lab results are. So either it claims that there's no THC and there is THC, or it claims there's X amount of CBD and there's either less CBD or more CBD than on the label. But it's also that people who are in safety sensitive positions who are being drug tested are reading the label thinking they can take something and they can fail a drug test because there's actually THC in the product, and they really didn't understand that when they bought.
Yeah, I'm hoping for that bucket, at least, now that we have RFK as a human health secretary, and his mission is to make sure foods and medications are safe. Right? Want us to get rid of fluoride and make sure all sorts of weird chemicals out of our red dye out of our food, and all these carcinogen, that the same logic would be applied to these products. People assume that if you're selling something that it's safe, and that's not happening.
Totally agree. So the second bucket, which is the THC that's derived from hemp, that's being sold as legal even in places that haven't legalized hemp, that's really a DEA issue. But interestingly enough, Mary Miller in the House introduced an amendment that passed in the markup of the Farm Bill last year that would take care of both that bucket of problems as well as the bucket of problems for the synthetic and semi-synthetic cannabinoids, by saying that if these products have the same effect as THC, then they would not be considered legal under the Farm Bill, which is exactly what we were hoping for. So that amendment did pass in committee, but the Farm Bill never went to the House floor, and a different provision went into the Senate Farm Bill that wasn't as stringent as Mary Miller's, but also tried to get on top of the fact that these semi-synthetic cannabinoids were an unintended consequence of the Farm Bill. So now, of course, it's a new Congress, and the Senate has flipped from Democrat to Republican control. So they're starting from scratch writing these bills. So we're working very hard again to try to convince everybody that they really do need to close these loopholes, because they're dangerous. It's extremely dangerous to have all of these untested, unregulated, potentially very health-threatening products on the market that people have no idea what's really in them or what the potential adverse effects.
Yeah, I mean, hopefully you'll have luck, because you're not going to make America healthy again by selling things that have never been tested. I always say these products haven't been tested in lab rats. They're being tested on our children.
That's absolutely right. That's absolutely right. And I want to say, Ronit, you'll totally appreciate this. When we have meetings with people who are on the House and Senate Agriculture committees, we do Zoom calls, and we bring in constituents from their states and their districts. So we're bringing in CADCA's prevention coalition leaders, law enforcement, school nurses, school resource officers, parents, youth. And it's unbelievable to hear the kids speak about the fact they cannot go to the bathroom in school at all because so many kids are vaping these products, and kids will say to them, "Why are you peeing in our vape room?" So, that's unbelievable. And then you have, the parents who are saying, most parents don't understand that this stuff is dangerous because it's being sold for $5 at the gas station and at the checkout counter.
With cute, colorful cartoon packaging.
Exactly. Yes. We didn't even get to that. Given this is totally unregulated, they're doing exactly what alcohol and tobacco are not allowed to do legally, which is making them have flavors that appeal to kids, packaging them with cartoon characters and very colorful packaging, and they're very cheap. You can buy this stuff for less than $5. And interestingly, sometimes there are strange bedfellows in policy things, and the, quote, legal marijuana industry is also trying to close this loophole because these products are cheaper than buying marijuana in a dispensary, and they're competing with the, quote, legal marijuana industry in states that have legalized. So very interestingly, the attorneys general of a number of states have banded together, and it's states that both have not legalized yet and that have legalized, saying to the Agriculture Committee exactly what we're saying. You need to close this loophole. This was an unintended consequence. These things are dangerous. There's really no way to regulate them. This is, basically skirting the law with impunity, and nobody's doing anything about it. And a lot of the attorney generals who signed on to that letter were from states that have legalized, because the legal marijuana market's already having to deal with the illicit market, and now they're dealing with this other market, and this stuff isn't even really marijuana.
Yeah. And Sue, you are really our nation's leading expert and advocate in this issue, because I think you've been working on this for years, and I've seen you and heard from you, like, getting groups together and getting amendments done and getting buy-in from bipartisan congressional folks on this issue, and then now you have a new administration, so it's like, okay, back to the drawing board, we got to do it again. But hopefully, even though you're starting from scratch, you have a lot of experience now with
a lot of members that were really helpful that are obviously still on the committee, and I think what really helped, I'm going to give you a really interesting example. So Congressman Finstead from Minnesota is actually the subcommittee chair in the House, the Republican subcommittee chair in the House, who has the part of the Farm Bill under him that the hemp provision is in. and he's always, been on our side. He's a guy who has, I don't know, 7 children of his own, and he's a real family guy. And he's certainly not someone who's, pro kids or adults getting high and using these substances. But last year, when our CADCA members went on our Hill Day and met with him, it was the youth explaining the extent to which these products are looked at by their peers as harmless because they're so easy to get, and because there's no age limit, and because they're not behind a counter, and because they look like bubble gum. And he got it. He got it when he heard from kids that this stuff is really pervasive. You can buy it anywhere, and those were the kids that actually told him specifically that they couldn't use the bathroom at schools in rural Minnesota because of the extent to which kids were vaping these products in the bathroom. That they'd go out, at lunch and go to the convenience store and buy some and come back. And they had to basically have a urinary tract infection for not being able to urinate at all in school because the bathrooms became, a drug den, basically.
That's inexcusable, frankly, but that's another.
When we had these calls, the school nurses and the school resource officers were explaining, and you get this, that almost on a weekly basis, they were calling the emerging medical people to come take kids out on stretchers who were foaming at the mouth and having all of these extremely severe symptoms from having used this stuff. It was very similar to bath salts.
Yeah, we actually did. I don't know if I told you this, but our prevention folks in San Diego went to these stores, bought a bunch of products, got it tested, and some products have nothing, some have THC, some have psychedelics, and some have bath salts.
Yes. So nobody knows what they're getting, but you can really have a bad trip. And some of these are being sold as much stronger even than the marijuana vapes, which could be 60 to 99% THC themselves. A lot of these are being sold as being stronger than those. And the other big issue here is that these are being put into to drinks, and they're being sold as legal alternatives to alcohol to get you high, and they're claiming that they're safer than alcohol, which I'm not telling anybody to drink alcohol.
I know, and I just do see. I'm really hoping the administration can see the problem here. You can't come in and say, I'm going to make America healthy again and clean up the food supply, and yet give this an exception.
I couldn't agree more. Obviously, I think that you're 100% correct, but that's why we are best friends. It's very interesting that, people will do anything to make money, regardless of the extent to which it might hurt public health, youth, and everybody else. And unfortunately, law enforcement has a lot to do, and this has been a legal gray area. So not only will I call it a legal loophole, but it's a legal gray area because courts are finding for this hemp-derived psychoactive substance industry that, in fact, because of the language in the Farm Bill, they're saying that this stuff is actually legal because it's derived from hemp. So that's a really big problem for us now.
And the FDA role is very confusing. From what I understand very simplistically, is FDA says, we can't regulate this, even though the Farm Bill said, right, that they're supposed to regulate it. It's like, you got the definition wrong and your language wrong. Congress, you need to fix this. We can't fix this.
Right. Well, they can't fix this part of it because given this is psychoactive, it really isn't in the purview necessarily of FDA. It's really supposed to be in the purview of DEA. And the lawsuits happened because DEA did determine that some of these substances which mimic the effects of Delta-9 THC should be scheduled. And that's what the lawsuits were about. And the courts are saying that DEA does not have the authority to do that because these were legalized in the Farm Bill as far as being hemp.
Yeah.
It's very confusing, and it is definitely a legal, quote, gray area. And we need it to be black and white, that these things really are illegal, that they were an unintended consequence of the Farm Bill. No one passed the Farm Bill thinking that we were going to create another industry that was selling highly psychoactive and dangerous products to everybody, but including and especially to young people and young children.
So we're now 2 months into a new administration. Things are getting doged. I'm sure it is a stressful time to people working in DC. How are you getting along with this specific issue, with this farm bill? Are you hopeful, or is it chaotic, or?
Oh, well, we're hopeful. They're starting to work on it again. What's getting doged for the most part are things that cost money. So programs that the administration doesn't like, or thinks are wasteful, or are not in accordance with the executive orders that the president has put out on things like diversity, equity, and inclusion. This is really in the purview of the Congress to be able to change this law. Now, hopefully the administration will be supportive of our efforts, because as I said, when I worked at OMB, we wrote the enroll bill memo, so that if the farm bill passes, the president would have to sign it. And obviously he would. This is a tiny provision in a multi-billion-dollar bill that includes food aid, farm subsidies. I could go on and on. It's billions of dollars. And this is one provision that's like, 15 lines in a 1,000-page bill.
Right. So I read that that's one of the problems with Congress, is that everything is a big fat bill with a lot of things in it, instead of taking just that piece out and voting on that one small, that you don't, and I don't know enough, Sue, you're the expert. If you don't vote enough on one small regulation, everything has to be in a package.
The problem is there's not enough floor time for every single thing to be passed separately. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to just explain how this works because it's interesting. Of the thousands of bills that are introduced every year, less than 5% of them are ever passed into law, because it's a big process. You have to introduce a bill, it gets referred to a committee. The committee has to mark it up. Once they mark it up, it has to go to the floor of either the House or the Senate. Then it has to go to the floor of the other body. If the bills don't match, they have to go to a conference committee. It takes a tremendous amount of time and effort to get a bill to the president's desk, because it has to pass identically. So now you have a 1,000-page bill, and if anything is different in the House and the Senate passed versions, they have to go to a conference committee to work out the differences. So it's a very time-consuming process. So for the most part, that's why they bundle everything up into these gigantic bills, because it's much easier to pass a gigantic bill and get floor time for it than it would to pass every provision of the Farm Bill separately. That would be the only thing that ever passed in the entire session of Congress. Like literally less than 5% of the bills that get introduced ever become law.
Yeah,
so a lot of them are markers. And so people could, introduce a bill on this separately, just as a marker to say that they care about this, but it would never move, not in the context of the larger piece of legislation, because there's not enough floor time.
Yeah. So the farm bill and protecting our youth is an issue that's important to CADCA. So now tell us about CADCA. And I love the story of the students who go on the Hill and advocate.
Oh, well, we feel that, who we are, we represent multi-sector prevention coalitions that work extremely comprehensively in a community by bringing all 12 sectors of a community together. So schools, parents, youth, law enforcement, the faith community, the medical community, the media, youth serving organizations, you name anyone that has anything to do with keeping kids safe, healthy, and as drug-free as possible, they're at the table. And then they look at data in their community about youth substance use, adult substance use, who's using what, where, to what extent, how kids are accessing, when they're using. And then they come up with strategic action plans so that everyone in the community has a role in solving whatever that community's substance use problems might be. And I will say, for the most part, for 10 to 19-year-olds, the biggest issues are usually underage drinking, vaping marijuana, and vaping nicotine. And those kids who start using those substances early are the more likely kids who move on to use other substances. So the more you can, one, stop or delay use and put off when someone starts, the more likely they are not to have a lifelong substance abuse issue. And so we believe prevention and comprehensive prevention, not just raising awareness about the costs and consequences of drugs, but teaching kids refusal skills, teaching kids life skills, how to deal with stress in a productive way, training parents on how to talk to their kids about drugs, how to recognize if your kid is starting to use, dealing in schools with teachers and other kids that have anything to do with kids, having school-based curriculum on these issues, ensuring that police have the community support to be able to stop people who are selling or giving alcohol to those under 21. In a lot of places, the police will get involved and parents will go, why aren't you going after real criminals? Why are you bothering to go after our kids? And the point is, it's illegal. It's illegal for kids under 21 to drink or use marijuana, even in the places, for the most part, where it's been legalized. And police need community support to be able to enforce those laws.
But it's not just it's illegal, okay? It's smart deterrent policy that protects our kids and our future.
That's why it is illegal. That's why 21 is the drinking age, because we know that the brain doesn't fully develop till after even 25.
Right. I mean, I would say that the drinking age should be 25, but
no, I don't disagree with you. So to make a long story short, CADCA represents 7,000 community-based multi-sector coalitions who are doing very comprehensive prevention work, including reducing access and availability. So a lot of these coalitions are the same people who are working in states that have legalized, where there is local control allowed, to opt their towns out of having dispensaries and marijuana selling locations. So they're doing a lot with scale and scope to create communities that kids will have the best chance of being able to make smart, healthy decisions across the board, but when it specifically comes to substance use.
And very importantly, they're successful, right? Don't you have data showing that
outcomes? Yes, it's incredible. When you look at the outcomes of doing comprehensive community-wide prevention, we see population level reductions in use, even in something like marijuana, where at best the Monitoring the Future and the National Household, the NISDA survey from SAMHSA, National Survey on Drug Use and Health, will show at best maybe marijuana is a little stable or down a little bit. We're still seeing 7 and 8% reductions in youth marijuana use in the places that are organized, have coalitions, and are doing comprehensive community-wide strategies to actually put off the age of initiation. And a lot of this is raising awareness and training parents, teachers, clergy, coaches, everyone that comes into contact with kids, to know how to talk to them, and to know that, in fact, this isn't a rite of passage, this isn't safe, that the marijuana that people might have used when they were kids is certainly, it's a different drug. It's a totally different drug. Like we explain to people, the marijuana from even 10 years ago or 15 years ago to now is the difference between a red silo cup of, beer and a red silo cup of Everclear alcohol that's 125 or 150 proof. It's just not the same thing.
That's a good analogy. And you have, you mentioned all that, but you also have youth influencers, right?
We do. So the thing that CADCA is training the adults on is that we need, youth are not the leaders of tomorrow. These are the leaders of today. So what we do is youth-led and adult-guided. We have youth at the table on an equal basis with the adults, because they do know what's going on with their peers. They know better than anybody else. They also know how kids are accessing information, where they're accessing information. So if you're going to try to do some sort of a campaign to reach kids, you better not do it on Facebook, because that's not where they are. You really need to understand, like, as social media changes. Like we're on Facebook, but my grandchildren are not.
That's
They're
right.
using
No, Facebook's like
Snapchat.
the old lady platform, right?
Exactly. So that's the other thing. If youth aren't involved, then one, the messaging to youth needs to be youth oriented, and it needs to be things that are going to resonate with youth. We have to know how to communicate with youth in a way that they can actually access, care about, and hear the messages, and actually even receive the messages. And so you have to segment, who you're getting what messages to. And you can't do that unless you have parents and youth and other people who are the end users of what you're trying to convince them about at the table. So that's why it's really important. And youth in a public policy, arena are the best messengers. It's very hard for an elected official to argue with a 14-year-old who's explaining how kids are accessing, what they're using, why they're using. Adults, they might not listen to, they would tune you out. But when a kid comes in and actually has the grit, the guts, and is practiced and can tell you, well, here's the data in our community and what it says, but then they're going to put a face on the data so that the elected officials can't ignore what they're saying. It's extremely powerful.
Yeah. Wow.
And you came to our forum this year.
You invite me every year, and I'm amazed. I think, and you have like 4,000 people there.
We do, and this year we had almost 700 youth who were trained to be able to do exactly what adults do: look at the conditions in their community, figure out what are the ones that are the most salient with causing kids to use, then working to change those conditions. And a lot of changing that is changing policies, practices, and procedures at the local, state, and national level, which is what we're trying to do with the Farm Bill, right? Yeah. We're trying to actually take these products off the market so that people can't use them anymore.
That's upstream prevention.
Exactly.
Yeah. And we should put a plug out to the CADCA forums, because you do that twice a year, and anybody involved with prevention should attend one of these at that point. They're very inspiring.
We do too. The National Leadership Forum is in the end of January, beginning of February every single year. It's in DC because we have an entire Hill Day, which is the Wednesday of that week, where this year we had 2,200 people going to Capitol Hill with 6 asks. A number of them are, please continue to fund upstream substance use prevention. Please close the loophole in the Farm Bill. Please don't pass the Safer Banking Act, which would allow marijuana businesses to be able to launder their money basically in our legal banking system. So there's a number of things, and everyone goes up, brings up youth, and is singing from the same song sheet. And we also have incredible presenters like Ronit, who presents every year on any substance you can think of, but also how to do good prevention, the links between prevention, treatment, and recovery. It's very, very robust, very broad, and wonderful experts. And we have all of the federal partners there. So DEA, the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration, the National Institute on Drug Abuse, National Institute on Alcohol and Alcoholism, you name the federal agency that has anything to do with this issue, and they're there. And then our second big event is called our mid-year training institute. And that is more intensive sessions that are longer. So the sessions at the forum that you've done both of our events, are 70 minutes. The ones at the mid-year are 3.5 hours, so that you can go into a lot more detail and depth about a specific issue, and people can get a lot more information. And that's always in July. And that doesn't have a Hill Day associated with it. It's really much more intensive training, so that you leave having spent 3.5 hours with an expert rather than 70 minutes. So there's still a lot of sessions, very broad. Thank you for bringing that up, Ronit. And anyone who's interested can get in touch with us.
Yeah. Anybody involved with prevention should attend that. Now, what's the difference between CADCA and the drug-free communities?
So CADCA is a nonprofit organization that represents substance use prevention coalitions. I brought the idea for the Drug-Free Communities Program, which is a federal grant program, to Congress, and it was passed into law in 1998. So the Drug-Free Communities Program is an actual program that provides up to $125,000 a year for 5 years, and then you can apply for another 5 years for coalitions to do exactly what I said CADCA trains people to do comprehensive community-wide multi-sector planning, implementation, and evaluation. But it's a federally funded program that CADCA supports. I am the advocate for that program, so I've worked on getting it authorized, reauthorized, and funded every year. And CADCA has worked to grow that program. It was a $10 million program in 1998. And in fiscal year 2024, last year, it was a $109 million program, and there's 750 grantees. So if CADCA is 7,000 members, 700 and something of them are actually receiving federal funding to do the work through the Drug-Free Communities Program.
So some drug-free communities get their money from federal government to do their grant projects, but there's many other prevention programs. Can they be members of CADCA as well?
They can definitely be members of CADCA because we provide materials, training, webinars of interest to anybody who is interested, not just in even substance abuse prevention, but across the continuum of care. So anyone can be either an individual member. So yes, anybody can belong. But our big focus is to help build multi-sector capacity. So to give you an example, you were at the forum. So Botvin's Life Skills Training has a booth at the forum. Wonderful evidence-based program. But one program alone isn't going to really change a community environment. It's totally important. It's a necessary part, say, of a comprehensive strategy to have evidence-based programs, but evidence-based programs alone aren't going to move the needle. They need to be part of a much bigger comprehensive plan that changes the environment in the community. So you can, train kids with peer refusal skills and, how to deal with stress. But if they go into disorganized communities with bad social norms where their parents think it's fine to use and there's no consequences, there's too much access and availability, that's harder for a kid to make the right decision than if they go out into a community where the norms are not that it's okay to use if you're under 21, where there isn't a lot of access and availability, where there isn't an alcohol selling outlet or a marijuana dispensary on every corner. It's, as you know from the science, the more access and availability there are, the more kids perceive this to be okay in their community, not dangerous. Like, obviously, this is everywhere and it looks like everyone's using it. And then social norming is important. Most kids don't use, and most kids and adults think most kids do use. That's not true.
Right.
Most kids actually don't use.
Right. And I've learned that very clearly. Always promote the social norm that actually most kids are making the decision to protect their brain and not use alcohol, tobacco, or marijuana, or any other drug. That's the social norm, even if it doesn't feel like it, because those kids are quiet, and the kids who are loud are the ones who are, talking about their drug use. And so that's pretty impressive. I am impressed also the prevention folks are active in their community and identify threats because they change on a weekly basis.
Absolutely. It's very interesting because, people call us to ask us to find out what is going on in communities. We had a congressperson from South Carolina call about tianeptine, which is like gas station heroin. If you've probably heard of that, it's one of these things you can buy as if it's an.
What is it called again?
Tianeptine.
Tianeptine.
Tianeptine. It's like an old pharmaceutical that I don't think is in use anymore. That was, I think, an antidepressant. But anyway, it's bottled and sold, and people have died because of that. So they called us. We got Tom Brown, who you know from the Colombo plan, to go in with his drug testing machine to test the stuff to see like what was in it and, you know, what the consequences of using it would be. And yeah, this stuff's really dangerous, but it's not regulated at all. And again, you can buy it at a gas station.
Yeah. Yeah. Again, if we want to make our food supply and vaccine supply and medication supply safe, it should apply to these things too.
And the thing is, elected officials, it needs to get to them that this stuff is going on. Otherwise, how are they going to know that they need to pass a law to regulate this or to make it illegal or to schedule it? And that's why it's so important that regular people who really know what's going on in their communities talk to their elected officials about the issues they're facing. Because you're 100% right, and this has nothing to do with the Farm Bill. But I think, as you know really well, Rooney, it's not just fentanyl. There are nitazines and there are other classes of opioids that are much, much stronger than fentanyl that are also in our drug supply that no one is talking about, that most people don't know about. So Tom Brown, the person I talked about who goes around the world testing drugs with his machine, knew about xylazine and sent out an alert in 2020. That was a good 3 years before anybody in America was talking about xylazine. But now there's another animal tranquilizer that I have to think if I can think of the name of it. But anyway, that's actually also in the drug supply that's not xylazine. So you have Congress doing a xylazine bill, and it should be a broader bill about, you know, animal tranquilizers in the drug supply, but they don't know about the other one yet.
Yeah. By the time they get to it, it's xylazine is not the biggest threat now, right? It's always behind. We're always like a step
We're always behind. Exactly.
Yeah.
And the other thing is for law enforcement, who has the labs to test this, once they can find something to charge you with, like they, you know, will find fentanyl, they stop testing. They don't look for the other stuff that's in the drug supply. And the issue is there's bad pharmaceuticals, there's animal veterinary products, deworming products like levamisole that's in the drug supply, and that stuff lowers white blood cell counts. So when you looked at why people who use drugs were dying at much higher rates of COVID, a lot of it could have been that they were taking things that were actually lowering their ability to fight infection without having any idea that that was in the drug supply, and their doctors didn't know that was in the drug supply.
Well, drug use in general kind of suppresses your immune system and makes you more susceptible to problems.
Yeah.
But all right. So what is you kind of mentioned it, what you said, that your 6 points that the youth says, but what is your key message for CADCA to the Trump administration?
Our key message is that we have to really move upstream, that the most cost-effective way to deal with any epidemic, drug epidemic, any other health epidemic, is to prevent it before it starts. And frankly, substance use is totally preventable if people don't start using substances. And the longer you can put off when someone starts, the more likely you are that they will not have a lifelong substance use problem. And so we need to sort of shift our focus upstream to ensure that less and less and less people initiate early, because, you know, once someone has a substance use disorder, it's a lifelong relapsing condition. And obviously treatment is extremely important. Recovery support is extremely important, but those are much more expensive than doing effective prevention upstream. So the most cost-effective and effective, and I know you've had Dr. Mark Gold on your show. He has a line that I'd love to end with, which is the only 100% safe and effective treatment is prevention.
That's true. Yeah, and it works, and it's important. It's where we need to be.
Well, thank you so much for having me on your show. I've always wanted to do this, so I'm thrilled to have gotten the opportunity.
I don't know what took me so long, but it is wonderful. It's wonderful to see you, Sue. Thank you for all you're doing for our country, for our youth, for prevention. It's an important voice, and you're very influential, and you're good at your job. And so if anybody can get this loophole fixed in the Farm Bill, it's you. And that's just one small piece of all the amazing prevention work that you're doing to really help this generation and the future generation of Americans.
Oh, well, thank you, Ronit. And I thank you for all that you do to educate Americans across the board about the dangers of using substances. You've done an incredible job. Thank you.
Love you.
Love you too. Bye.
Thank you for listening to High Truths on Drugs and Addiction, where you learn from experts from around the globe and around all aspects of drugs. This week's episode would not be possible without the generous support of our sponsor. A sincere and warm thank you to Drug Free America Foundation. Visit dfaf.org. And Isaac, the International Academy on the Science and Impact of Cannabis. That's IASIC1.org. High Truths producer is Dave Rivas from Davey Boy Productions. I'm your host, Dr. Ronit Lev. We hope we brought your day a little bit more High Truths.